If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is the Amy Bradley case. Episode 2, The Mystery Deepens. We continue to look at what is probably the most infamous cruise ship disappearance in modern history, that of Amy Lynn Bradley. I'm, of course, your host, Bruce McGuire. And if you want to help support logic and reason and awareness in true crime cases, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support MindShock. Help us keep up awareness in various cold cases, missing persons cases, wrongful convictions, and more. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons who get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, or debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. So make sure you check out episode 1, one of the most comprehensive analyses on this case. And all of the various wrinkles in the case. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes here. I mean, it's just very, very difficult to get around some of these issues, including all of these supposedly verified sightings, even though they're not necessarily reported as such. However, there are grand jury testimonies, multiple polygraphs passed by these witnesses in various locations, both on the ship the morning of and also months and months later in Curacao. So let's go to amybradleyismissing.com, a very good resource on the case that I've referenced in episode 1 as well. But there's even more information here that, believe it or not, we did not go over. And MindShock is, of course, comprehensive and exhaustive. We will be upturning every stone and examining every piece of evidence and every theory as usual. So, quick recap here. Amy Lynn Bradley, while on a family cruise to the Caribbean, went missing from the Royal Caribbean International Cruise Line ship Rhapsody of the Seas. On Saturday, March 21st, 1998, the vessel departed San Juan, Puerto Rico, and traveled to its first port of call, the island of Aruba. On Monday, March 23rd, 98, Rhapsody of the Seas departed Aruba and was traveling international waters to its next island port of Curacao, Netherlands Antilles. During the early morning hours of Tuesday, March 24th, 98, Amy Lynn Bradley went missing. The vessel later departed Curacao and continued on to the island of St. Martin, and further traveled to St. Thomas, United States Virgin Islands, before returning to San Juan, Puerto Rico on Saturday, March 28th, 98. Now, just a quick point here. All of the sightings, the least talked about one is, again, another unofficial sighting in San Juan. That Saturday, March 28th, upon the return, someone claimed they saw Amy Bradley get into a cab. That's all the information we have. It's a little snippet. That's all there is, unverified, just in the interwebs, lost in the interwebs, this one little reference. And the reference includes that this individual supposedly passed 1 or 2 polygraphs regarding this sighting. So either it was Amy or the person believed it was, saw the photos. Maybe it wasn't her, but someone similar to her. We don't have those circumstances, so we don't know if the person was really close to them to the point where they could ID tattoos and such. But again, has the FBI intentionally not wanted this sighting or any of the sightings to be verified for whatever reasons as they're conducting their investigation? But I find that the most curious because this is the one not like the others. Because all the other sightings are on these other islands. But this is the only sighting in Puerto Rico, which just so happens to be the final destination. This is where it docked after the cruise. I mean, it also departed from San Juan. So, and it docked here. So is there a possibility that Amy could have been on the ship the whole time? And the only way this works, of course, I mean, not the only way. Let's not fall for any false dichotomological fallacies. I mean, I really try to call out my own fallacies and make this, obviously, MindShock as objective and logical and neutral as possible. If there's a few different options. If she left the ship at Curacao then all those sightings could have been legit. Or she didn't. The cab sighting is fabricated. The other sightings months later may or may not be fabricated, because even if she went back to Puerto Rico, either against her will or not, if it was against her will, then she was taken back to Curacao. But would they really take her back? That's one of the biggest issues here. And furthermore, as I speculated in the McGuire theory, I might have a McGuire theory too coming up, centered around the so-called scam artist. I mean, and fraudster. Is he working together with the other individuals who reported the sightings? So this situation works whether or not it was really Amy or not, because it could work with it really being Amy, and maybe we'll get into that later, but I just wanted to again point out the sighting nobody talks about is the sighting of Amy Bradley getting into a cab March 28th in San Juan, the final destination, returning to port. But let's continue here on AmyBradley'sMissing.com. The Bradleys believe Amy's kidnapping was the result of a well-planned and organized group effort, including several people on the ship. Amy was obviously selected early in the cruise. Her photographs disappeared, and Eva discovered someone staring at Amy from a higher balcony. Aruba was the first. I mean, that's interesting, that reference there. So there, and apparently also the waiters and some of the staff making comments. Aruba was the first stop during the cruise, and the Bradleys spent the day touring the island. They returned to Rhapsody of the Seas for dinner. This was when one of the waiters asked Ron Bradley if Amy would go with them to an Aruban bar known as Carlos and Charlie's. Of course, this is the bar that Natalie Holloway disappeared from. Amy declined because she didn't feel comfortable about the waiter and referred to him as creepy. He had been overly attentive. Ron actually expressed concerns that the waiter was attempting to fraternize with Amy. After Amy disappeared, the FBI interviewed the Portuguese waiter. Here's another thing, too, though. Depending on how sick and insidious and connected these people are, if they are trafficking criminals, they might want to rub it in the father's face. But if these are just random low-life waiters who just want to mess around with Amy and they didn't plan to hurt her for real, would it be more likely that they would make that comment to the father? Because if they're planning to, I mean, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough, because if these are evil bastards, maybe they would go out of their way to intentionally make that comment to a father of someone they're going to traffic. But I mean, if they just don't want the attention, why would they make the comment to the father? You know, yeah, it's weird. It depends on what kind of a criminal this individual would be, or this group of individuals. Because it seems kind of weird to call even more attention to it, because then they know the father's going to remember the waiters who asked if the daughter could go to the bar. You know, I mean, I don't know. That's a weird one. During the FBI interview, the waiter claimed that Eva Bradley had questioned him about procedures when someone falls from the ship. Eva claims the discussion never took place, and she asked the FBI to give the waiter a polygraph. The polygraph was never given to the waiter. But the Bradleys are convinced that this waiter was involved because of his interest in taking Amy off the ship, and because he fabricated the story about the conversation with Eva. The kidnapping was probably originally planned for Aruba. The Curacao wharf with Alistair Douglas was likely Plan B. It would have been easier to kidnap Amy away from the ship and at night. The head waiter lied to the FBI and attempted to falsely incriminate Eva Bradley. I mean, this is actually very, very interesting. This is very, very interesting. Because if the waiter is complicit, would he make up a story about Eva asking about someone falling off the ship? I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to even bring up. I mean, even if she did mention that, why would the waiter tell the FBI? I mean, I don't know. This is all really weird. But why would Eva randomly ask a waiter about that? I mean, that's kind of weird too. I mean, if she was going to ask somebody about that, I mean, why would it be the waiter? It probably would be, you know, either the security staff or some other staff. I mean, why would, I don't know. This is all very, very weird. There's a lot of things that don't make sense. Douglas is weird. But this is a curiosity here. If they really did target Amy Lynn Bradley, does it make sense that this original attempt would have been in Aruba. Also via Carlos and Charlie's with a sketchy history. And we're going to go into super mind shock land. I'm going to drop it right here just so people know what's coming. I don't want to tease too much. There's an additional photograph of Jas, the escort, whose photo popped up online that many believe, including an FBI image analyst who's willing to bet his entire career that is actually Amy Lynn Bradley. There's actually another photo that was taken at Carlos and Charlie's where she appears in the background. So Carlos and Charlie's in Aruba, years later, 2005-ish, I'll get to that in a moment, roughly around the time that the photos online were discovered, although allegedly they could have been online as early as 2002. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many things that don't make sense in this case. I mean, this really is one of the most baffling cases ever. I mean, I knew it was pretty deep before tackling it, but the rabbit hole, there's so many more rabbit holes than appear at first, and they run so much deeper than one would think. I mean, this is firmly in mind shock land. But if that's kind of a trafficking hub where a lot of people seem to hang out, was that the original plan, and then there was plan B? Now, even plan B might not have gone off without a hitch. And I'll be going over into, again, another McGuire theory where if something went wrong, like perhaps if Alistair Douglas is just this womanizer guy, he plays in a band, maybe he wanted to get something going casual with Amy Lynn Bradley. What if something went wrong? There was possibly some kind of an assault with or without other staff, and it just all went wrong. And that's when they decided to traffic her instead of murder her because they figured that was less risky if they happened to have contacts. So there was never even a plan to traffic this American woman traveling with her family on a cruise. Not all criminals are super intelligent. Like a lot of the coincidence theorists and those who believe that human trafficking is just so ultra rare, just definitely couldn't have happened in this particular case. I mean, there's a lot of these Dunning-Kruger goofs running around and on all these cases just chastising anybody who even suggests the possibility of any kind of human trafficking, let alone of an American woman traveling with her family. I mean, yes, you would think that highly organized, experienced criminals and traffickers would never select a target like Amy Bradley. But what about the bottom of the barrel? What about low-level criminals or even aspiring criminal scum who don't really have the experience of human trafficking, but they hang out with criminal scum that they know are involved in human trafficking? So they might have even done this either intentionally with extreme forethought or just stemming from an assault gone wrong. They're like, oh, well, we know these other people. Maybe we can make some money trafficking her. That seems like the better option instead of murdering a human being. I mean, there's all sorts of criminal scum out there. Some of them they don't murder people. They just wouldn't do that, especially an intoxicated person, an innocent woman. They just would never do that. In their brain, human trafficking might be a viable option, but murder is not. There's all kinds of criminal people out there. So pretending and hallucinating to know exactly which kind of criminal could have been involved here, obviously that's illogical. We wouldn't do that. So depending on the type of criminal they are, and obviously if there was human trafficking involved here and she was trafficked, that doesn't mean that was the intention all along. This could have been some just weird plan after an assault gone wrong involving criminals who knew traffickers and wanted to exploit those connections while covering their own tracks because she could easily identify them and they couldn't let her, get back to the States or go to authorities or whatever. So, yeah, there's a few different possibilities here regarding the waitstaff, or they might have not even been directly involved and they just might have heard things from other people. But yeah, this waiter's behavior is definitely weird. So let's continue on here. Let's look at this diagram here. So the Rhapsody of the Seas left Aruba at 1 a.m. and traveled 70 miles to Curacao. The ship waited off the coast of Curacao for clearance to dock. Prior to 5 a.m., Rhapsody of the Seas was given permission to leave the ocean and enter the canal in Willemstad and proceed toward the Bunker Wharf area, where the ship was designated to dock. Traveling through the canal is not a fast process. Ron Bradley saw Amy on the balcony of the family suite between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m. Rhapsody of the Seas passed under the Queen Juliana Bridge. At this point, Amy Bradley was probably on the top deck with her camera to photograph the colorful buildings along the canal. Witnesses have testified for a federal grand jury, now that's witnesses plural, that Amy was seen on the upper deck with Alistair Douglas between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. Now, this is very, very interesting because, again, a lot of the Dunning-Kruger crowd that hallucinate that Amy Bradley definitely never left the family suite. She either committed suicide or accidentally fell over this high railing while drunk, and somehow that's definitely what happened. They completely ignore all of these witnesses, some of which have passed polygraphs. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's kind of hard to completely write them off. I mean, so they clearly believed it, unless they're some kind of sociopathic, psychopathic masterminds. I mean, some of these were college girls. There was also another random middle-aged woman. So we'll be getting into that in a moment. They passed polygraphs and they testified in front of a federal grand jury. It wasn't just an offhand comment to some news thing for attention, because they clearly have not come out with their names and done all these mainstream interviews and wrote books for fame. Clearly that's not the case here. So what kind of a goof would completely ignore and write off these witness statements that Amy was seen with Alistair Douglas, not just by herself, but with Alistair Douglas between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. Now, here's another thing. So, supposedly this camera, I mean, I'll get into that in a moment, but yeah, let me finish here. Rhapsody of the Seas entered the Kattegat Bay and turned 90 degrees to the right. The ship proceeded to back into the specific dock assignment at the Bunker Wharf location. Rhapsody of the Seas had completed docking procedures by 6 a.m. when Ron Bradley went to the upper deck. By 6 a.m., Amy had already disappeared. Now, here's another thing we didn't really talk about. Nobody really talks about it. All of this happened in the time span. This isn't out in the open ocean. This is all basically within the canal. So this is all through docking procedures, which is, of course, not a fast process. I mean, this is kind of weird. What are the logistics and how do they affect what happened? I mean, this all happened in this tiny area in a certain period, in a certain window of time. So, all right, let's continue here. So here's an image of the upper deck of the Rhapsody of the Seas. Witnesses testified for a federal grand jury in Richmond, Virginia, that Amy was seen here with Alistair Douglas minutes before she disappeared. Amy had her camera with her, and it is believed she went to the upper deck for photographs of the Willemstad Canal. She was not wearing shoes, and she did not run through a parking lot looking for a phone. So this is according to this website here. They are claiming here that the cab driver's account is false and only for reward money or whatever. But so she's going to take that is interesting. She's believed to have gone to take photographs of the Willemstad Canal. Interesting. So the question is, did she when she was dancing with Douglas, what kind of words were exchanged? Was there a plan put in motion to meet up in, X amount of hours on the upper deck for whatever reason? Or was this an accidental run-in? Did Alistair Douglas also want to watch the sunrise, whatever? He happened to be on the deck, and also curious as whether or not he does that every day. And he happened to see the girl he was dancing with mere hours before, and then something happened from that point on. I mean, it's very difficult to make heads or tails of this, but this is the information we have. So ignoring all of these federal grand jury witnesses that passed polygraphs, I mean, that's kind of a weird thing if you're trying to be logical, objective, and neutral here, and actually caring about the truth instead of just assuming it had to be a suicide or an accidental fall over the edge just because one is too mentally weak to face the harsh reality that human trafficking is unfortunately a very real thing. And also, not all criminals are experienced masterminds. Some of them are really dumb, and they might actually attempt to traffic an American woman traveling with her family, especially if it was to cover up another crime. So here is AMW.com. There's a quote here. The FBI has had little success. We've pursued every angle from whether there was foul play, a suicide, or an accident, and we have basically not gotten anywhere, said James K. Weber, special agent in charge of the office in San Juan, Puerto Rico. FBI agents with trained dogs searched the ship Friday and Saturday but turned up no trace of Bradley, FBI spokeswoman Sarah Lemma told television reporters. The agents took deck furniture and other objects from the cabin for testing. Steck said, "That's curious." FBI officials and family members said they never received any ransom demands. They believed she left the cabin and was kidnapped somewhere on the ship. So according to AmyBradleyIsMissing.com, Amy was probably removed from Rhapsody of the Seas through the cargo doors in a container or laundry cart. There is a service elevator from the upper deck where Amy was last seen to the cargo area. Witnesses testified for a federal grand jury in Richmond, Virginia, that Amy was seen on the upper deck with Alistair Douglas minutes before she disappeared. Amy had her camera with her, and it is believed she went to the upper deck for photographs of the Willemstad Canal and coffee. Witnesses testified that Alistair Douglas was seen giving Amy a drink that contained a dark liquid. Rhapsody of the Seas has a glass elevator. Witnesses on the upper deck testified for a federal grand jury that Amy and Alistair Douglas arrived in the glass elevator at the same time. Witnesses also testified that Alistair Douglas was seen leaving the upper deck alone in the glass elevator. Okay. So this detail was mentioned. We went over this in the first episode. But they specifically saw that they arrived together. They arrived in the glass elevator at the same time. Then he was seen leaving alone. What does that mean? The FBI gave Alistair Douglas a polygraph. The results were identified as inconclusive. When Alistair Douglas left the room, he flashed a thumbs-up sign to his friends and Ron Bradley. More info here. This is the canal in Willemstad. It is not part of the ocean. Rhapsody of the Seas passed through the canal to dock at the Bunker Wharf in Kattegat Bay. Passage through the canal required about 55 minutes. It is believed that Amy went to the upper deck for coffee and to take photographs of the historic buildings along the canal. 3 witnesses, so not 1, not 2, 3 separate witnesses testified for a federal grand jury that Amy was on the upper deck, and Alistair Douglas gave her a drink containing a dark liquid. It appears that Douglas may have previously told Amy about the vantage point on the upper deck for photographs of the canal. Amy would have no way of knowing she was being set up when she arrived to take pictures. Amy brought 15 rolls of film with her on the cruise. Her intention was to make a project with the photographs under glass in her new apartment. She wanted to cover the top of a trunk with photographs from her trip. According to Eva Bradley, Amy planned to cover the photos with glass. The Bradleys have 14 rolls of film. 2 rolls of film have been developed. They are photographs of Puerto Rico and Aruba. Amy's camera with 1 roll of film is missing. Okay. So if this is all true, so wherever this insider got information from, because all of the info on this website actually does check out that I've been able to verify, so there's certain pieces that I haven't been able to verify with other sources. But what I have been able to verify from official sources, all cited with references in the first episode, if you haven't checked that out yet, make sure you check that out again. So where did they get this info? That Douglas, it appears Douglas may have previously told Amy about the vantage point on the upper deck for photographs of the canal. So, yeah, this is tough. Because how exactly, when would they have taken her and where? Is it possible they went to the elevator? Supposedly there's a service or staff elevator next to the elevator. Is it possible he said, I mean, what could have happened? Even if he drugged her with the drink, then what? He led her away to the staff elevator? Took her to some staff quarters, which were supposedly not searched in the initial search, and possibly not in the second search either. We don't have that information. And then he went back to the main elevator, and that's where people saw him leave alone? Is that what happened? So, yeah, I mean, this is really dark because if he's just setting this up as possibly an assault, possibly not even against her will, but if she's not going for it, did he drug her and then that happened? Or was this all a plan for the very beginning as a human trafficking setup? In which case, did he tell her about the vantage point on the upper deck for photographs on purpose? Or did he tell her that innocently if they were talking about cool photography or she mentioned she wanted to take photos and a plot came into play after that? Again, we have no way of knowing, of course. So apparently, passing under the Queen Juliana Bridge was approximately the time of her disappearance. So let's continue on here. Here's a satellite image. This is the Bunker Wharf area where the Curacao cab driver claims he saw Amy running and looking for a phone. This area is little more than a parking lot with lots of oil tanks. The dock was portrayed in Vanished as having brick customs building and sidewalks, but that is not correct. When the Bradleys returned to Curacao to search for Amy, a Curacao cab driver approached them. He claimed he had seen Amy when the ship was docking. He said he recognized her green eyes, which had been clearly described in the reward poster. The cab driver claimed that Amy was running through the parking lot looking for a phone. He also claimed that he had seen Amy in other locations on the island. Wow, that's interesting. I don't think we had that piece of information before. So he not only claimed to have seen her right after the ship docked, but also randomly in other locations on the island. The problem with this story is that Amy had already been drugged and kidnapped. She wasn't running anywhere. Amy was an intelligent woman. If she had experienced a problem, she would have gone directly to one of the police officers or customs agents who were there when passengers disembarked. There would have been no reason for her to approach a cab driver in search of a phone because none of the Bradleys' phones were capable of international calls in 1998. The Bradleys had all turned their phones off in Puerto Rico. Amy had nobody to call. The cab driver failed to mention that Amy was without her shoes. Running through the parking area would have been very difficult without shoes. Amy was not seen in the parking area by anyone except this cab driver. There were no other reports. The cab driver gave his information to Ron Bradley a month after Amy disappeared. Okay, so let's dissect this a little further. To me, and I'm assuming the FBI questioned this guy. If they didn't, that would be an oversight. But the number one question for me would be about the watch she was wearing. Because the Carmichael sighting, even though not till months later, he described the watch she was wearing, which that information had not been public and was not on the missing persons poster. And he described the watch perfectly. So, either it was Amy or he had some other kind of intel or whatever, but the cab driver, or he could have said he doesn't remember the watch she was wearing, or if she was even wearing a watch. I mean, I don't know. Do people specifically look at watches? So that's not definitive proof, but if he could identify the watch, then that would support his story. If he couldn't, that doesn't necessarily mean it's false, but... Also, the issue here that the Bradleys had turned their phones off and they weren't even capable of receiving calls in 98 anyway, that's curious because that's a good point there. Just another point about the Vanished show, which we did go over. Beth Holloway and the producers of Amy's Vanished program asked Alistair Douglas to be part of the program. He declined. After the program aired, Douglas contacted them and complained that he was not fairly represented and his reputation had been damaged. Now, here's another curiosity. If he's guilty, would he make that phone call? Now, if he's guilty, that also doesn't necessarily mean he wouldn't even want to do the show, right? I mean, there's all kind of psychopaths out there. Some criminals actually like the attention and rubbing it in. So, but yes, most criminals probably wouldn't appear on the show if they indeed were guilty, but how many would actually call and specifically complain after the fact? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he could have filed a lawsuit, did he? I mean, it just says he called and complained. So, an article on LAUTH missingpersons.com. After 13 years, mystery still surrounds the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Reflecting on the days before Amy's disappearance, Amy's mother, Eva Bradley, recalls several members of the crew paying special attention to Amy from the moment they boarded the trip. So, wow, so right away in Puerto Rico? That's curious. I see we didn't have this level of detail in episode 1 because if they were that interested in her right away, I mean, maybe they were planning something then. Supposedly, one of the crew that was interested in her was also a female from Hungary. Not that that means anything, but Eastern Europe is a human trafficking hub, of course. I mean, that's just a curiosity. I think it was mostly men and then the one female that Amy was, again... It's difficult to say, was she really chummy with them genuinely and they weren't genuine, or were both sides genuine and then things kind of changed after a certain point? But the day preceding Amy's disappearance, Amy's parents were approached by a waiter who asked for Amy by name. The waiter said they wanted to take Amy to Carlos and Charlie's restaurant while docked in Aruba. Her father recalls thinking the waiter's request was uncomfortably forward. Well, why wouldn't they just ask, oh, where's Amy, to talk to Amy? Why would they ask the father for an adult woman? I mean, it's just so weird. That makes me lean toward the innocent side unless they're really psychopathic and they wanted to rub it in. But a short time later, Ron and Eva told their daughter what happened. Both parents are now haunted by Amy's response. Quote, I wouldn't go and do anything with any of those crew members. They give me the creeps, end quote. Creepy didn't stop there. Later that night, the family attended a party on the upper deck where the band was playing. During the party, Amy, accompanied by her mother, went to the fourth deck photo gallery to view pictures of the vacationers that had been taken earlier in the evening. All of the photographs taken of Amy were missing. When they asked the gallery manager where the photos were, he stated he remembered developing them and placing them with the others, but was unable to locate them. Eva then asked the photo gallery manager to remake the photos. Okay, this is a huge mind shock here, because this is all very vague in other sources. So here it's stating this was before her disappearance. So... what? Before the disappearance, so the day before, 1 to 2 days before, the photos were all taken before she disappeared. Wow, this is really creepy because this is making me really lean to this was an operation to take her. Because why would they take all the photographs? Were they already showing them to prospective buyers at this point? Unless that story's not true, but why? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's verified that they were all missing, but I thought it was after she had gone missing, but apparently, according to this, it's before. I mean, this is really weird. There's even more information here. This is from the Dr. Phil show. Amy's mother, Eva, explains how the cruise came about. In '98, my husband, Ron, won a trip, and so we went as a family. Our first stop was Aruba, and then after that was Curacao. When we went on the ship, we noticed immediately that there was a tremendous amount of attention towards Amy from the crew members. After dinner, the waiter came out of the dining room and asked me where Amy was. And I asked him why, and he said, well, we want to take her to Carlos and Charlie's. Wait, so they asked both the mother and the father? This is all really creepy. Some people actually think that the boss, Ron's boss, was somehow involved. Did he arrange for her to be trafficked? Because he's the one that allegedly took the tape of Amy dancing by the videographer, and nobody knows what became of it after that fact. He apparently never showed it to the Bradleys, or the Bradleys never knew about it. Why would he hide that from them? I mean, it's just so weird. If it was all a setup before they even got on the cruise ship, I mean, this is really weird. When Amy came back, I said... when the waiter asked, I thought it was maybe a little forward of him to be asking those types of questions, Ron adds. So I guess they asked both her parents at the same time, maybe. When Amy came back, I said, the waiter wants to take you to Carlos and Charlie's with his friends. And then Amy looked at me and said, they're creepy. I'm not going anywhere with them. There was a dance troupe that was allowed on board the ship, Eva continues. There was a bass player who I noticed, and he was a very unsavory looking character. Amy told her brother Brad that the bass player had been hitting on her. She said that he was a real jerk. Would her family randomly lie about all of this? Because some people, they don't trust, they think they're covering up some kind of suicide or something. But again, I mean, or what are they alleging? They paid off three witnesses to the point where they not only passed polygraphs but testified in front of a federal grand jury. I mean, I don't know, that's kind of weird. Let's get into one of these witnesses. Elizabeth was a witness the morning Amy disappeared. Elizabeth was not one of the two college students who saw Amy with Alistair Douglas in the glass elevator. Elizabeth was a young woman who was on a cruise. A few days before the cruise departed, Elizabeth had been sick and she was on strong antibiotics. Because of the antibiotics, she couldn't go into the sun. She discovered that if she spent time in the disco area, she could see everything that was happening all over the ship. The disco was never closed and there was always someone to talk to. Elizabeth was in the disco area early in the morning that Amy disappeared. She watched Amy and Alistair Douglas get off the glass elevator and enter the disco area. Alistair Douglas turned the music up, and both of them walked to the bar in the disco area. Elizabeth watched Alistair Douglas give Amy a drink that contained a dark liquid. It could have been Coke or coffee. Elizabeth was waiting to take an excursion into Curacao. She left the disco area and waited to disembark from the ship. She recalled seeing a lot of Arab men in their white clothing walking around the cruise terminal. There was an Arab oil tanker docked near Rhapsody of the Seas. Elizabeth returned to the disco bar the next morning. The bartender had previously been very friendly, but he was now being aloof. Elizabeth asked him if he remembered seeing Amy with Alistair Douglas in the disco bar the previous morning. With that, a young Hispanic woman who was working at the bar became very upset. She started telling Elizabeth that, who's ready for this quote? Quote, the señorita had been kidnapped, end quote. Elizabeth received a subpoena and she did appear in a federal grand jury in Virginia. She testified that Alistair Douglas was with Amy before she disappeared. Okay, so we're getting to all new levels of creepy here. I mean, we are so firmly in MINDSHOCK. I mean, this is straight out of a horror movie. Everybody's friendly, everything's nice. As soon as something happens, all of a sudden, nobody knows anything about about the missing person, and then you even have someone becoming upset and stating that she was kidnapped. Now, again, if this young Hispanic woman was just upset, you know, she could have been repeating the rumors that Amy was kidnapped, not necessarily with direct knowledge. But is it kind of weird that the bartender is now not being friendly randomly? But only when she asked him about Amy and Alistair Douglas. Maybe he's friends with Alistair Douglas, and he doesn't believe that Douglas was involved in any way, but that might make him feel weird, possibly. Or he's not friends and he's scared. I mean, what are the options here? I mean, this is all really, really, really weird. Or the third option, maybe if the whole crew knows about it, were they all complicit to some level? Did the bartender provide the spiked drink? I mean, again, this is MINDSHOCK. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I repeat that many, many times, but the comment section is just full with supposedly functional adults who just cannot comprehend that very, very basic point and the motto of the entire podcast, which is, of course, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But with this extra information here, it does not seem that this Elizabeth would have misidentified Amy. People say the young college girls misidentified her, but we have three separate individuals all corroborating the story and clearly identifying Amy, who they would have seen multiple times by this point. Especially Elizabeth, because that's all she did was just sit and watch. Alright, okay, now we also opened up another avenue here. The Middle Eastern trafficking possibility. And again, some people say this is all wild theorizing. But we have more information here. We have more information. Eva and Amy attended an art auction on Sunday, March 22nd. It was in the open area of the ship. Several times during the auction, Eva looked to the levels above them. A man was leaning on a railing, intently watching Amy each time Eva looked up. Amy also noticed this man and mentioned it to Eva. It continued for about an hour until Eva finally stood up and waved her arms at the man. Eva described the man as Middle Eastern in appearance, and she definitely thinks he was involved with Amy's disappearance. He reminded Eva of a young Saddam Hussein. Eva bought a modernist serograph of a blonde woman sitting in a chair to hang on the wall of Amy's apartment. It's still rolled in its brown cardboard tube. Okay, so this is definitely right out of a movie here, but this isn't some weird vibe. He stared at her for an hour straight intently, and it was so bad that Eva actually got up and waved at him and waved her arms at him in some kind of fashion to kind of get him to stop. Is that what that was? And supposedly there were quite a few of similar individuals walking around the cruise terminal shortly after her disappearance, or shortly after Elizabeth left the disco area where she saw Amy with Alistair Douglas. See, here's what's weird though. If these are some like oil sheiks or people with some kind of diplomatic immunity or literal billionaires, I mean, when you get into that category of people, I mean, the amount of money they have and might throw around just to acquire an American woman, especially one that just struck their fancy, so to speak, they're not technically part of any kind of human trafficking operation. They just wanted her. You know, yeah, this is weird. This is really weird. Continuing on here, Amy sent 2 postcards to her friends back home when she was in Puerto Rico. On America's Most Wanted, the FBI stated they found no reason for Amy to leave her family or cause harm to herself. Amy took 15 rolls of film with her to make a collage for her coffee table. While in Aruba, she brought presents for her friends back home and also sent postcards from Puerto Rico to her friends. On one postcard, she wrote, quote, "Hey girl, it's gorgeous here. We leave for Aruba tomorrow. Take care. Tell Madison and Niles hello. I'll be home Saturday at 10. See ya, Amy," end quote. On another, she wrote, quote, "Hey, it's beautiful here. Old San Juan has some amazing buildings. I am taking pictures. Maybe you can see them at Easter. Wish you were here, Amy," end quote. Another point here, on March 23rd, the day before, the Bradleys spent the day touring Aruba. They rented a car for the day. They returned to the cruise ship for dinner and remained on the ship for the rest of the evening. They took part in activities on the ship. Rhapsody of the Seas left Aruba at 1 a.m. for the 70-mile trip to the nearby island of Curacao. The cruise ship remained just off Curacao for the remainder of the night. Then at 5:30 a.m., the ship was in the canal and began docking at the open bunker wharf in the Kattegat Bay. Okay, so is it possible she was spotted while they were around Aruba? And whoever wanted to take her there, that didn't work. So they modified the plan, and that's why it appeared to be somewhat sloppy. But, yeah, I mean, once we start involving these Middle Eastern people, I mean, this is kind of weird. This is kind of weird. What does everybody make of this thus far? I mean, I also just can't shake the fact that the Bradleys, there's just a weird vibe that just there's so much attention on Amy from the crew and from these Middle Eastern people, possibly extremely wealthy. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Would poor people be taking... How many poor people were on this cruise? I mean, it seems like a pretty extravagant cruise. I don't know. I mean, they have art auctions and 24/7 discos and glass elevators in the 90s. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Also, a few different posts, a few different articles and discussion on this case. They do reference that Amy had spent some time socializing with some of the crew, but that's all it says. It doesn't say where or how or what to what extent. I mean, were they lunches? Exactly with whom? Was it with the female from Hungary? Was it from one of the other waiters? Maybe she liked one of them and she didn't like the others. I mean, I don't know. It's all very, very weird. On sitcomsonline.com, there's a fair amount of discussion on Amy Lynn Bradley. Here's a theory from S2H2K 2007 posted on July 27, 2012. Hello all. I will start by saying I have a touch of OCD. I get fixated on things, and one of the things I've been doing extensive research on lately after seeing it on TV was the Amy Bradley case. The one where the girl on the cruise ship disappears. It was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, Vanished, and Dr. Phil. Anyway, so after exhaustive research, here is my theory. If it is in parentheses, it is what I'm basing it on. Sorry, this is going to be long. Here's what we know from interviews with her brother and father. Amy was at the dance club in the early mornings with her brother. She was dancing with the bass player for the cruise ship band, Alistair Yellow Douglas. Amy goes back to her room and sits on the balcony with her brother. He goes inside to go to bed. This is approximately 4 a.m. Her dad awakens at 5:30, sees Amy on the balcony, still wide awake. He goes back to sleep for a little longer. I mean, I don't believe she was wide awake. I believe he said that he thought she was sleeping. When he awakens around 6 a.m., she's gone. From here on out is my theory on what happened based on eyewitness accounts. Amy left the balcony and either ran into Alistair Douglas coincidentally or planned to meet the band member. 2 girls reported seeing Amy and Alistair walk into the club at around 6 a.m. after getting off an elevator. I believe Amy left the boat and entered Curacao willingly after the boat was docked, but she was not alone. Her brother stated that she mentioned earlier she was going to venture onto the island early to pick up some items. I don't see a reference for that. It would have been too difficult to get her off the boat against her will, I feel. In addition to Douglas, she was also seen hanging around with several waiters. She could have accepted an offer from one of these men to go to the island after meeting up with Douglas. I do not believe she fell overboard. The boat was preparing to dock and was extremely close to the shore. Amy was captain of the swim club and a trained lifeguard. Also, at this time in the morning, people were surely up and would have heard something. The surrounding waters were checked. The next known sighting was by a cab driver who told the Bradley family that Amy approached his cab in a panic and said she urgently needed a phone. Had the plan to kidnap her taken effect, she was trying to contact her family to tell them she already exited the ship or for help. Why didn't she tell the cab driver she was in trouble or anyone else? Question mark. I have a feeling this cab driver might have been mistaken in who he saw. He said he remembers her green eyes, but I'm not sure this happened. If it did, her captors caught up to her for a second time. If it did happen, she was already kidnapped at this point. The next known sighting was in August of 98 in Curacao, 5 months after Amy's disappearance. A man claims a woman walking on the beach heard him speaking English, so speedily walked up to him, but he was grabbed by 2 men and led to a cafe. The man followed, and the woman made obvious attempts to show her tattoos off to the man, and the man listed the tattoos that they matched Amy's. Next was a naval soldier who visited a brothel in 99 in Curacao. A woman came up to him and said her name was Amy Bradley and she needed help, that she couldn't get away. Out of fear that he would get in trouble, as he was not supposed to be in that brothel, he waited 2 years to report the incident. A woman named Judy said that she saw Amy in 2005 in a bathroom in Barbados. She was in the stall and heard them saying a deal was going through and don't try to ruin it for them. When she came out, the woman said her name was Amy and she was from Virginia, that the men came in and grabbed her and Judy ran. Here's my theory on that. We all know by now that the pictures from 2005 that were on a website of an escort named Jazz that bears a strong resemblance to Amy Bradley that provides adult vacations. It is now under new management and has moved locations from Curacao to the Dominican Republic, stating on their website that Venezuela, where Curacao is close to, does not like Americans and was giving them grief. In actuality, the first place burned down. What Judy might have witnessed was this organization selling off some of the other girls to this Barbados operation, because now on their website they only have local girls from Dominican Republic, or so they claim. So that's where we stand. I also examined the pictures that were on the website of Jazz and painstakingly compared them to every picture and video of Amy Bradley I could find. Although it has been a few years, I examined every inch of the face and they are exactly the same in every feature. The only thing I would say from the pictures that are not 100% is Jazz's nose at the tip seems to bend slightly up while Amy's slightly down. This could be the angle or makeup, however. Also, they strategically cover all of her tattooed areas with hair or camera positioning. An FBI investigator examined the pictures and stated unequivocally that it is her and that he would stake his career on it. So there you have it. The only question is who led Amy off the boat. On Alistair Douglas's Facebook page, it claims how religious and spiritual he is almost ad nauseum. Although he was questioned and given a polygraph test, he was not detained. Could he be the spotter for a human trafficker? He allegedly said to Amy's brother, quote, "Sorry about your sister being missing," end quote, when only the family and the captain knew she was in fact missing at that point. However, I did read that the captain looked around the boat and one of the first places he went to look was the band's quarters and asked them if they saw her. Did the captain tell them she was missing? Why would Alistair word it the way he did? Hopefully Amy will be found in soon. Sorry for this being so long. Okay. Huh. Yeah, that's the other thing. Someone also the woman Judy in 2005 and the other two gave composite sketches of the girl that they saw. They can be seen on the Charlie Project website. The sketches from the witnesses are identical to Jazz. That's another good point. That's a point that it's hard to write off Judy's sighting in Barbados because it just happens to match Jazz on the website in 2005. She did not give a description of the way Amy looked in 98. Another post here. The more I think about it, it seems as though Amy had planned to meet up with someone. Either that or she just got up to smoke a cig. And she was persuaded for whatever reason to leave the ship and go into town. I think she most likely met her fate there, with it probably planned, and she was assaulted, killed, and buried somewhere there. This would seem the most logical explanation. I can't believe someone would have her live, work, and risk being caught, nor does it seem she fell overboard, just my opinion. This case seems a lot like the Claudia case at the Jamaican resort. I mean, you would think that, but then again, if you recall from episode 1, the most haunting montage I ever put together is of all of these people on the escort website who just so happen to look identical to just all of these people that have gone missing all over the world. some of the most infamous cases, and a lot of these people have very prominent or very distinct facial features. And what's also curious is that some of the age progression photographs just so happen to look exactly like the photos on the website, which would have been years and years after they were missing. It's really, really mind-shocking. So, from a post here on Web Sleuths under the name Find Amy, I will try to fill you in as much as possible on Alistair Douglas or Yellow. I personally believe that Alistair Douglas and possibly a Portuguese waiter were paid to drug Amy and deliver her. Alistair Douglas was the bass player in a band called Blue Orchid on Rhapsody of the Seas. After the first day of the cruise, there were several crew members who were overly attentive to Amy. Even Eva commented on the first day about how turned off she was by Alistair's behavior. He was obnoxious. The waiter was also overly attentive. The day that the ship docked in Aruba, the Bradley family rented a Jeep and toured the island. When they returned, the waiter asked if Amy would go with them after dinner to a bar called Carlos and Charlie's. This is the same location where Natalie Holloway disappeared 7 years later. I personally believe that Amy was supposed to disappear that night in Aruba. It would have been much easier than trying to take her off the ship in Curacao. Amy told her parents she wouldn't go anywhere with those waiters because she thought they were creepy. Amy stayed on the ship with her family. She and Brad won a limbo contest and then headed for the disco. See, this is another point here. It seems like she'd be well known on the ship. I mean, she's winning limbo contests. She's dancing. I mean, all these waiters. She's supposedly spending a certain amount of time with waiters and staff. Her photographs are allegedly going missing before she did. I mean, it just really seems like she's very well known to a number of individuals on this cruise. This is where Amy ran into Alistair Douglas again. Okay, so there was apparently... So she's the first day. So apparently she met Alistair the first day. So days later... Wow, this is crazy. So then she runs into him again, and this is the Chris Fenwick video where she's dancing with Douglas in the disco at this point. Amy and Brad returned to the family's room. The door logs show that they both entered the cabin. How would they show that, though? Because if the door is only opening one time and they're both going in. At 5:30, Ron Bradley awoke and saw Amy in the lounge chair on the balcony. I posted floor plans and photos of this arrangement. Okay. Ron awoke again at 6 and Amy was gone. She did not have shoes. She only had her Marlboro cigarettes with her. By 7, the Bradleys were looking for Amy and they had reported her missing to Royal Caribbean. The family assumes that Amy went in search of coffee. At about this time, one of the waiters approached Amy's brother, Brad, and told him how sorry he was that his sister was missing. It was impossible for the crew members to have known that Amy was missing at this point in time. Unless, of course, again... Wait, if this was before they informed the captain. So there's several different accounts of when they informed the captain. Some of them are closer to 7:30. So did this encounter take place before the captain knew? In the meantime, there was a female passenger I will refer to as E. So this is Elizabeth. Elizabeth became ill a few days before the cruise. She was on heavy antibiotics. She couldn't go into the sun. She discovered that if she spent time in the disco area, she could see a lot of what was happening on the ship. She was awake early because she wanted to disembark in Curacao. She had gone to the disco to wait until she could leave. While she was sitting there, she saw Douglas and Amy get off the large glass elevators and walk to the bar in the disco. Alistair Douglas turned up the music in the disco. Elizabeth then saw Alistair bring Amy a drink containing dark liquid. It appeared to be Coke or coffee. Elizabeth left because the passengers were preparing to disembark. Amy was never seen again, although Douglas was seen in the glass elevator by himself. Elizabeth's statements have been verified. She passed a poly and did testify before a grand jury. One report indicates that Alistair was later found asleep in his room. I personally believe that Amy was passed off to another crew member before she was removed from the ship. An important piece of information is that there is also a staff elevator that leads from the disco. 2 college co-eds also saw Douglas in the glass elevators. Douglas was questioned by the FBI. His polygraph was inconclusive. He maintains he doesn't know what happened to Amy. He claims that Amy had a drink in the disco with the band at about 1 a.m. and he didn't see her after that time. He claims that the Royal Caribbean searched his room and found nothing. There was no evidence that Amy had been with him, and the FBI never charged him with anything. After the cruise, Royal Caribbean fired Alistair Douglas for fraternizing with a passenger. That's pretty curious, huh? In August of 98, 6 months later, an engineer from Canada and his friend were diving at the beach in Porto Marie, Curacao. His name is David Carmichael, and he was shown on the Vanished program. David has been a wonderful help to the Bradleys. He has passed polygraphs and appeared for interviews. David was organizing his equipment on the beach when he noticed a woman and two men walking towards him. The woman had a horrified expression on her face. She appeared frightened. David, is it also possible this was the first time she was actually out in public since she was taken? And, well, I don't know. She appeared frightened. David began to respond to her, but one of the men with her ran between them. David said the man gave him a threatening look. David and his friend were later on the deck of the outdoor bar. They were sitting close to Amy and those two handlers. David had a full view of tattoos and other distinguishing things about Amy. David didn't know who Amy was until he returned to Canada and he saw her featured on a program. He immediately contacted the Bradleys and the FBI. Royal Caribbean sent their attorneys to David's home in an attempt to intimidate him. But he had absolutely maintained that the man with Amy was Alistair Douglas. And this is another wrinkle in the case. A lot of people don't know this piece of info. That not only did Carmichael say he saw Amy and identified the watch that was never made public about the watch, but he also claimed that one of the men was Alistair Douglas. So Alistair Douglas gets fired, and then months later he shows up on a beach with Amy, possibly. Alistair eventually returned to his native Grenada. Also, Grenada is right next to Margarita Island, where this adult vacation resort was said to have been operating, so not just another curiosity. He has reportedly found religion and he's been part of a band. He has had some other small business ventures. Douglas is married and has at least one child. When the producers of Vanished were preparing to film the show, they contacted Douglas. They offered him an opportunity to publicly give his version of events. Douglas refused to have any interaction with the program. After the episode aired, Douglas contacted the producers and complained he was innocent and that he was unfairly represented in the film. Also, I think someone else tracked down that he has a daughter that was the same age as the amount of years since Amy vanished. Not that that means anything, but yeah. Oh, what do we have here? Apparently here's the source for the Puerto Rico sighting. Things are about to get interesting. This source here is from Style Weekly magazine. It is still up on their website. Amy Bradley disappeared from a Royal Caribbean cruise ship March 24th, 98. Believing she's been abducted, her family refuses to give up the search. Amy interrupted. The phone rang once. Since her daughter Amy's disappearance 9 days earlier, Eva Bradley hadn't been in the habit of letting it ring any longer than that. She had transformed the family dining room where her husband Ron kept a desk for his insurance business into a command center with a new white trimline phone hooked up to a recently installed hotline number. World maps and photos of Amy's were tacked on the wall, updates and info on the search. On the other end was a middle-aged sounding man with a deep voice. He was speaking Spanish. Un momento, por favor, Eva said, quickly, frantically waving to her younger brother, Paul Noblin, who was also in the room. Okay, the man on the other end said in a thick Spanish accent. It was to be the first promising lead in the puzzling disappearance of Amy Bradley, a vivacious, attractive 23-year-old from Chesterfield County, a 96 graduate of Longwood College who was a star basketball player there, and the only student in the school's history to receive a full athletic scholarship. The strange nature of the case has attracted national attention, from a front-page story in the New York Times to The Lisa Show, America's Most Wanted, and Unsolved Mysteries, which is slated to air a segment about Amy on May 28th. Cosmopolitan magazine is also planning a piece on Amy. On March 24th, 98, while on vacation with her mother, father, and brother Brad, Amy Bradley vanished from the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas, which was preparing to dock in Curacao. Her father, Ron Bradley, was the last to see her as she sat on a deck chair on the balcony of cabin number 8564, the family's stateroom, at about 5:30 that morning. A massive 3-day search at sea turned up nothing. The Bradley family left the ship and flew home without Amy and virtually no clues until the morning of April 2nd when the Spanish-speaking man called Eva Bradley. Eva's brother Paul hustled across the street of the Bradley's suburban Chesterfield neighborhood to a common close friend and neighbor of Eva's who speaks Spanish. Within minutes, the woman was sitting at Eva's desk talking to the Spanish-speaking man and hurriedly taking notes. Though her friend was speaking and writing in Spanish, Eva could tell from the excited sound of the woman's voice that the man must be saying something important. If true, what the man said was not only important but explosive. According to a lawsuit the Bradleys filed against Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited last month, alleging negligent security and other charges, the Spanish-speaking man told Eva's friend that he saw Amy 4 days after her disappearance being forced into a taxi cab at the terminal at San Juan, Puerto Rico, shortly after Rhapsody of the Seas docked there on March 28th, 98, the day that should have been the last day of the family's aborted week-long cruise. Providing previously unpublished details not mentioned in the lawsuit, Bradley's lawyer say the witness was a Puerto Rican local who was studying to be a police officer. He called Eva Bradley after seeing a story about Amy on Puerto Rican television and recognizing her photo as the woman he had seen just days before. Okay, so unlike the taxi driver in Curacao who reported this months later after the missing posters were plastered everywhere with rewards, this guy contacted the Bradleys within days. This is a guy studying to be a police officer. Andrew Hall, one of the Miami-based attorneys representing the family in the lawsuit, says the witness claims that Amy was under the control of a man wearing a baseball cap. Quote, "It was a clear day, and she passed right by," Hall says of the Puerto Rican man's account. She was firmly held. Her appearance was not that of a happy person, to say the least. The witness thought they were fighting. They didn't look like they were getting along, like they were disagreeing, end quote. The witness said that the man in the ball cap then guided a disoriented-looking Amy into a taxi, leading her much like a policeman would direct a suspect in the back seat of a squad car, according to Hall. Hall won't say more about the alleged abductor or the eyewitness for fear of harming the investigation, he says, though he adds there is a suspect in Amy's disappearance. So what happened, and if Amy was abducted and there's a suspect and a witness, why hasn't there been an arrest? For starters, the Bradleys called the FBI agents in St. Thomas investigating Amy's disappearance and faxed them the Puerto Rican's witness name and number. More than 8 months later, the Bradleys learned FBI agents never interviewed the man. Okay, so here's the problem. Okay, if this is true, okay, wow. I mean, this is insanity. This is complete insanity. And combine that with the ever-changing FBI listing on Amy Bradley, with and without age progression photos. I mean, was this really that shoddy of an investigation, or is there something more than meets the eye here? I mean, are they intentionally not trying to solve this, or did they already know exactly where she was, so there was no need to investigate the witness? That's the only thing I can think of. If the FBI are above board in this, I mean, you would think they would still interview the witness, though. But I mean, I don't know if they are. If they, let's say they had eyes on her and her abductors at that moment. Now, the FBI obviously can't operate outside the U.S., but you know they could give the lead to Interpol or whatever. They have sources, etc. People giving them info and all that. Despite records the Bradleys have proving they sent the information, the FBI denied ever receiving the lead, Eva Bradley says. U.S. Department of Justice agents working with Interpol finally interviewed the witness early this year. In a photo lineup, he positively identified Amy as the woman he saw last April. Hall will not say if the man identified a suspect. Quote, "We had lost time because leads were not followed up. We were told the FBI would leave no stone unturned," Eva Bradley says angrily. We were confident that they were contacting the witness, following the lead, and tending to everything. A spokesperson with the FBI office in San Juan says they cannot comment on pending investigations, but they say they are following all pertinent leads and are doing everything we can do to solve the case. Of course, what you would expect them to say. But this is kind of damning in the direction of the FBI. I mean, this is pretty bad. So the Department of Justice agents and Interpol interviewed the witness. So the FBI never even ever interviewed the witness? They just never did it. The U.S. Department of Justice and Interpol did it. So the FBI denied all the info, and then even after they got it, they still never actually interviewed anybody regarding this particular witness. I mean, this is crazy. Instead, possibly because whatever happened to Amy began in international waters, the Bradleys have found themselves negotiating a bureaucratic labyrinth as they search for an answer to Amy's disappearance. They get no help from the FBI, they say. They have written congressmen, foreign officials, and even the president. The only promising response they received was a personal letter from Newt Gingrich, who promised to ask FBI Director Louis Freeh to intervene and assist the family personally. Freeh never called. Wow, this does not look good for the FBI. I mean, this is just terrible. Now, supposedly 2 FBI agents did do a search on the ship. Do we know for a fact that they were really FBI agents at this point? I mean, do they have their identities and everything? Or is there some funny business involving the FBI in that area in the Caribbean? Are they somehow either involved in the human trafficking, or let's say they really are the good guys? Is it possible Douglas or maybe some of these other individuals are CIs helping them with other cases? Is that a possibility? And that's why they didn't want to push because they were going after bigger fish? Since then, the family has taken matters into their own hands, hiring PIs and manning websites and a 24-hour phone hotline. They've secured commitments of a $260,000 reward for information leading to her safe return. To date, they've spent more than $85,000 of their own money selling their Honda Accord, for example, to fund one of 6 searches in the Caribbean since Amy's disappearance. They've even funded a trip for investigators to go back aboard the Rhapsody of the Seas. They're raising more money for the search through contributions to a trust fund. Despite the long months that have passed, Amy's family hold firm to their belief that she's still alive and being held against her will. They will find her, and they say, and when she returns, March 24th, 98 will only be a bad memory and not the haunting mystery that fuels every waking minute of their lives. So there's actually no date here, but it looks like it's within 1 or 2 years, within 2 years or so of the disappearance. And they already have all this information. And this is all before the 2005 sightings or photos. So that's kind of crazy. All right, let's continue with this Style Weekly article here. Amy interrupted. Everyone else was pale and white after a winter spent under sweaters and heavy coats, but not Amy. After 3 weeks of indoor tanning, she was a fashionable brown ready for the Caribbean sun. On Friday, March 20th, 98, Amy and her mother were having dinner at her Aunt Mary's house. Mary Christensen and Eva oohed and awed over Amy's crisp tan lines as Amy laughed, showing off. Amy had just darkened her hair from a bleached blonde and gotten her fingernails done in anticipation of the Caribbean trip. Her father, an insurance agent, was one of about 35 agents around the nation who won an all-expense-paid family cruise from Illinois Mutual Life for selling $145,000 in paid premiums. Most agents just took their spouses, but Ron and Eva wanted to bring Amy and Brad, so they bought plane tickets for them and paid $2,000 for their portion of the cruise. Amy excitedly told her Aunt Mary about the trip, which would start in San Juan and take them to the islands of Aruba, Curacao, St. Martin, and St. Thomas before returning to Puerto Rico. They also talked about Amy's new job. On the Monday, after Amy was to get back from the cruise, she was to start working as a marketing and office assistant for Mary and her husband Mike, who owned a software company. Amy had cut her hours at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, where she worked full-time, so she could take the job. Long-term, Amy was thinking about getting a master's in sports psychology or opening a sports bar. A couple months earlier, Amy had moved into her first apartment in the Timbers, a complex off Robius Road in Chesterfield. Though she moved out of her parents' home, Amy was never far from them. She and her mother went grocery shopping together every week. They decorated Amy's apartment together. Her father helped her reupholster the chairs in the old dinette set her parents gave her. She and her mother loved to call each other up on the phone when something funny was on television, like Mystery Science Theater 3000 or Cal and Chicken. Amy was especially excited about the cruise because her brother Brad was home from George Mason University. Tall and athletic like his sister, and just 2.5 years younger, Brad was also one of her best buddies. The two would go out with friends or just hang out together, hitting Chesterfield bars, singing karaoke, throwing darts, shooting pool, or bowling. About 7 a.m. Saturday, March 21st, Amy and Brad boarded a plane at Richmond International Airport. Their parents left an hour ahead on another flight. Amy and Brad were both nervous about flying, but did crosswords and listened to Amy's portable CD player to distract themselves. By around 2 p.m., they reached the rambling ship terminal at San Juan and found their parents. Amy bought postcards at one of the tourist shops and sent them to friends. "Hey girl," she wrote, "it's gorgeous here. We leave for Aruba tomorrow. I'll be home Saturday at 10. She told another friend she was taking pictures and would show them to her on Easter. She bought 15 rolls of film and was hoping to take some pictures of Brad to enter in a modeling contest. At 11 stories high, the gleaming white 915-foot-long, 106-foot-wide Rhapsody of the Seas was an impressive sight docked at San Juan. Less than a year old, the ship weighed 75,000 tons and carried a crew of 765 with room for 2,435 guests. Amy looked up in amazement and told Brad she was having the best time of her life already. Then she saw the gangplank, 3 feet wide, 60 feet off the ground. Afraid of heights, Amy scrambled up quickly, staying as close to the center as she could. Saturday went by quickly with dinner, drinks, and swimming at the pool. Pretty tanned, muscular, slender, tall, 5'7", 115 pounds, and tattooed, Amy attracted a lot of attention on board the ship. She had been collecting tattoos since her senior year in high school when she got a tattoo on her left shoulder of baby Taz spinning a basketball to commemorate winning her basketball scholarship to Longwood. A primitive sun with the Chinese symbol for heaven on her lower back, a Chinese symbol for faith on her right ankle, and a gecko lizard wrapped around her navel followed. Brad had a similar Chinese tattoo on one of his arms. Sunday, March 22nd, the ship was at sea all day. Amy and Eva attended an art auction and bought a modernist serigraph of a blonde woman sitting in a chair to hang on the wall of Amy's apartment. It's still rolled in its brown cardboard tube at the Bradleys. By Monday, the ship docked at Aruba. Ron, Iva, Amy, and Brad disembarked. Amy did a little shopping, buying trinkets for friends back home. She wanted to buy a nice piece of jewelry for her best friend, but her mother told her to wait until they got to St. Thomas, where they could get a better buy. Eschewing the island tour, the family rented a Jeep for the day to explore Aruba on their own. They ended up lost on dirty off-roads in a windy, hot desert. Once back in civilization, the Bradleys had lunch at a Taco Bell and then drove to Palm Beach, where Eva, Ron, and Brad swam in the ocean, calling to Amy, laughing, "Come on in, the water's freezing." Amy clung to her dad's back in the water for a while, then got out. A certified lifeguard, she swam in her neighborhood association from the time she was 5 until 18. She was an assistant to the swim coach at Longwood and coached her aunt's neighborhood association, but she wasn't crazy about swimming in the ocean. Mainly, she was afraid of what else might be swimming in it. On board the ship, her parents and brother say she wouldn't get close to the railing. Even though the railings were chest high for her, it made her knees weak. That's interesting there too. So apparently she's an excellent swimmer. She just doesn't want to get in the ocean, and of course the railing is chest high for her. Okay, returning to the ship, the family took showers and dressed for a formal dinner. Amy wore a tight, open black jumpsuit with spaghetti straps. They waited in line to have their picture taken by the ship's photographer and chatted with other passengers. Meanwhile, Amy was attracting notice from passengers and crew. After dinner, Ron and Eva were having drinks with business associates when a waiter approached them. They recognized him as a man who had been lavishing an unusual amount of attention on Amy since the ship left dock. The man asked if Amy wanted to come to a bar in Aruba that night with him and other crew members. Eva later gave Amy the message, but she wasn't interested. Meanwhile, Amy and Brad had changed into casual clothes and gone to the ship's casino. Starting with $10 in quarters each, they played the slot machines and each won about $140. Ron and Eva found Amy and Brad again on the pool deck, each carting a bucket of quarters. The four of them sat down on the deck laughing and dumping the quarters out of the buckets like children building a sandcastle. Amy and Brad, ever competitive, counted to see who had the most quarters. Later that night, they took in a limbo party, dancing to the steel drum music of the ship's calypso band, Blue Orchid. Amy struck up a conversation with the band's bassist, a pudgy, bald Grenadian nicknamed Yellow, short for High Yellow, Caribbean slang for light black skin. It was typical Amy. Brad won the limbo contest that night. When he was crowned, Amy ran up to him, jumped up, and wrapped her legs around him. He took the crown off and put it on her head, and they both laughed. So again, for the people that say that she didn't really stand out, I mean, both her and her brother, they're winning contests, like they're front and center in a lot of events. The wait staff is specifically asking for Amy. I mean, this is kind of weird, but it does lead credence to the possibility that someone might have seen her and wanted her. And again, even at the auction, as previously mentioned, there was a Middle Eastern man who apparently was staring at her for a half an hour straight. Amy and Brad still had hours of partying ahead, but it had been a long day for their parents. Ron and Eva kissed them both goodnight, headed to the room. "I love you, I'll see you in a little while," Eva told Amy. It was the last thing she said to her daughter. At about 2:45 a.m. on Tuesday, Ron Bradley woke up. Neither Amy nor Brad was in the cabin. Earlier in the evening, Brad had a little run-in with another passenger when the man grabbed Brad and told him to stop dancing with his wife. Brad didn't know the woman was married and apologized. See, again, that's just another little incident where either Amy or her brother, there's some kind of a tension and commotion that otherwise in, the other hundreds or however many passengers are possibly more nondescript than both Amy and Brad. Wanting to make sure everything was okay, Ron sat up and told Eva he was going to check on Brad. He went to the ship disco, the Viking Lounge, and found Brad dancing with a handful of young women. Amy was on the second floor of the disco, talking with band members and the club DJ. Satisfied, Ron went back to bed. Okay, so apparently Amy... So did Amy possibly like one of the other band members, but she apparently talked to all of them or some of them, not just Yellow? So Brad did get up again Brad got up at 2:45 a.m., checked on them, then came back. At 3:45 a.m., Brad and Amy returned to the room. They went out into the balcony to smoke, but Ron woke up because they had left on the bathroom light. He told Amy to turn it off, and the last thing he remembered before going to sleep was the glow of her Marlboro light as she walked past. So this is another detail we apparently did not have before. So 3:45 a.m., is this the last definitive sighting of Amy by her family or by her father? This is at 3:45 a.m. as she's walking past him. Amy and Brad smoked for a while, watching the waves and laughing about the limbo contest. They also talked about the next day in Curacao, and Amy asked Brad if he had ever been on a jet ski. Finally, Brad opened the patio door and rolled into the sofa bed he was sharing with Amy during the trip. She stayed behind on the balcony. At about 5:30 a.m., Ron awoke and saw Amy's legs on the lounge chair on the balcony. Thinking she had fallen asleep, he went back to sleep. At 6 a.m., Ron woke up again. Amy wasn't in the room or on the balcony. Her cigarettes and lighter were gone. She had taken off the yellow polo shirt she had been wearing and picked up a pair of jeans. Ron looked for a note, Amy's habit before leaving anywhere, but there was none. Taking care not to wake Eva or Brad, he put on his shorts and went up to the pool deck, a level above, to look for her. The ship was docked at Curacao, having sailed into the island's canal less than an hour earlier. She wasn't on the pool deck. Ron looked other places with no luck. The more he walked and looked, the more uneasy he became. On the way back to the room, he saw the ship's chief security officer standing at the elevator. Ron asked for help, and the officer nodded non-committally, staying where he was. Nearly an hour had passed. Ron woke Eva and Brad. "I've known him since I was 13. I've known him 32 years, and I've never seen him look like he looked. I didn't have any idea what was wrong," Eva recalls. He said, "I can't find Amy." Ron and Eva immediately went to the purser's desk and told them they couldn't find Amy and suspected foul play. They asked for help finding her. The ship's employees told her it was too early and an announcement would disturb the other guests. They asked to see a supervisor who eventually agreed to make an announcement over the ship's loudspeaker. While the Bradleys waited, a ship employee announced that the gangplank would be going down so passengers could disembark on Curacao. Eva begged them to leave it up so that in case someone had kidnapped Amy, they couldn't get her off the ship. The ship staff refused, saying they couldn't hold up other passengers. So 2 points here. One, did Eva, Brad, or Ron, did they actually, at that moment, before the gangplank went up, did they actually go to the gangplank so that they can monitor each and every person who went past? But if it's the staff and they took her out through some kind of cargo area, I mean, would they really try to get her out over the gangplank? I mean, that's tough. That's tough to think that they would if they were getting her off the ship. I mean, we're going to get into another issue in a moment here. At 7:50 a.m., a young woman made a simple, quiet announcement over the ship's intercom. Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk? In the meantime, Brad went up to the pool deck to sit and watch in case Amy walked by. Yellow, the bass player, approached him. "Hey man, I'm sorry about your sister," he said. He asked what happened and told Brad to wait while he got a friend to listen to. Brad, who says that Yellow told him he was feeling guilty, remembers the experience as, quote, just odd, end quote. After they got back to Richmond, the Bradleys found another post from a Rhapsody passenger on a cruise ship computer bulletin board warning female passengers to stay away from Yellow for unspecified reasons. And of course, Yellow was fired, supposedly, for fraternizing in some capacity with a passenger. Okay, so is Yellow, we haven't specifically discussed this, but is Yellow really a red herring here? Is Yellow red herring? Because if he is really just a womanizer, because there's also a problem with some of these stories, because supposedly the story is on the escalators, Yellow, or either Yellow or someone else passed Brad and told him sorry about your sister. In this story, closer to the time of the disappearance, within a year or two on Style Weekly here, it's saying that he's on the pool deck when Yellow approached him on the deck, then went to go get another of his friends to listen to Brad's story. So this is an issue, because also there was some confusion as to whether or not it was Yellow or the head waiter who initially had said sorry about your sister. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever asked Brad specifically to clear up the confusion. Because, and if any MindShock listeners out there do have this information, who was it that initially told him, and why was there confusion over who said sorry about your sister? And even the location. Is it on the pool deck or is it on the escalators? Or wherever. Stairs, elsewhere other than the pool deck. Furthermore, Eva Bradley says 2 young female passengers, both college freshmen, claimed to have seen Amy and Yellow on the ship's glass elevator heading up to the disco at 5:30 a.m. Tuesday, the time of her disappearance, the teens said they saw Yellow leave the disco without Amy 15 minutes later. So is he really a red herring? Did he try something? He got rejected, and maybe another staff member did something. Did the bartender even slip something into Amy's drinks unbeknownst to Yellow himself? I mean, maybe Yellow really is like a womanizer and possibly a shady individual. Is it possible he had nothing to do with whatever happened to Amy and someone else did, and it's just an awful convenience? However, Carmichael claims to have seen Yellow with Amy. So how would that have worked? I mean, I suppose, not to fall for false dichotomies, is it possible after this whole situation, Yellow did grow closer to the criminal element? Maybe he knew some of these criminals and he just wasn't actively involved. After he got fired, did he get into drugs, alcohol, whatever, or not, and get even closer to the criminal element to the point where he possibly joined up with them and then found it, and Amy happened to be there after? And of course, he's not going to say anything about that. Maybe he even had his own suspicions and he was scared, and that's why he didn't come forward. Maybe that's why his poly's inconclusive. Because maybe he doesn't know what happened, but he has inclinations and suspicions about other members of the crew. Maybe even other members of that band. I mean, who knows? Band members sometimes come and go. Oftentimes in many bands. So, yeah, this is really tough because as we went over the previous account, Elizabeth, not one of the 2 young college freshmen, Elizabeth also saw all of this, and she said the bartender got really weird, and a Hispanic woman who was working at the bar said that Amy was kidnapped. Why would she say that? Is she just freaked out and nervous because of the rumors that it was a kidnapping? Or does she actually know something? You would think in a thorough investigation, she and the bartender would have also been polygraphed. Because at this moment, I'm going to say everything goes back to the bartender and that girl and Yellow. The bartender, the Hispanic woman, and Yellow. I would say that's, and of course the other staff members. But theoretically, it is a possibility that Yellow might not have been involved, unless, of course, he was involved and he passed her off. But I'm just going through every single possible theory where if he got rejected, he might have just left by himself, and somebody who was innocent but got rejected by a missing woman might not be so quick to volunteer the information that he did in fact meet up with her after the disco that morning. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities here, but let's continue. Mentioned in America's Most Wanted, Yellow is the only person to be publicly named as a suspect. I don't know if he was actually named was he named specifically as a suspect or a person of interest? A Royal Caribbean spokesperson says Yellow voluntarily submitted to a poly for the FBI and passed. So that's what a Royal Caribbean spokesperson said. That's not the truth, because apparently from other sources it stated that it was not inconclusive. So the Royal Caribbean cruise line, spokespeople, lawyers, they're definitely shady, especially if they're sending lawyers all the way to Canada to intimidate Carmichael about the sighting of Yellow and Amy. Ship employees told the Bradleys to wait in their rooms for the chief security officer. He asked some questions, asked for a photo of Amy. He told them she was probably visiting in someone's room and would show up. From 12:15 to 1 p.m., he told the Bradleys ship staff had searched every nook and cranny of the ship to no avail. In actuality, the Bradleys would later discover the staff had only searched the common area and crew area, leaving out all passenger sections and other areas of the ship, according to the lawsuit against Royal Caribbean. Now frantic, with more than 7 hours having passed since Amy's disappearance, Ron and Eva demanded that Captain Jetel Gjerstad pass out and post Amy's picture and alert other passengers to her disappearance. He refused, saying he didn't want to upset the other passengers. Then the captain presented him with an option. If Amy wasn't on the ship, she was probably on shore in Curacao or in the water. If they stayed on the ship, they might lose a chance to search the island. Eva asked the captain if he was absolutely sure, if he thought beyond a shadow of a doubt that Amy was not on his ship. She says the captain said he was certain she wasn't aboard and that the best thing to do would be leave the ship. Okay, so here's the problem I have here. If the captain is guilty and he knows she is on the ship, and we have the supposedly more verified sighting of Amy in San Juan by the aspiring police officer who notified the family within days, as soon as he found out about her, within days of the sighting. That seems to be more reliable than the cab driver who came forth months later claiming he saw Amy in Curacao, looking for a phone or whatever. Yeah, this is rough. But if the captain is complicit, I mean, this is really shady. This is, again, straight out of a horror movie. Like, just the vibes from the crew members, the Middle Eastern people. The Middle Eastern people might be the red herring here, right? I mean, who knows? But, or maybe there are no red herrings here. If the crew, if the Middle Eastern people wanted her and they paid off the crew to get her, but then what happened? Did they return? So the first official sighting, if we call the Carmichael sighting official in Curacao, the first official in Curacao, like we have the sighting in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, by the aspiring police officer days later on the 28th, but months later, 5 to 6 months later, the Carmichael sighting in Curacao, that's months later. Is it possible? And then, of course, at the brothel was months after that, in early 99. So is it possible she was taken somewhere by the Middle Eastern people and then returned for whatever reason? I mean, does anybody know how the Middle Eastern human trafficking works in terms of Caucasian women or Western women, so to speak? I mean, theoretically, you would think it wouldn't be indefinite. They wanted her for a period of time, and then they no longer wanted her. Did they sell her back? Like, what happened there? And is that why she showed up again in Curacao, whereas there were supposedly no sightings other than the sketchy cab driver? I mean, this is all very, very perplexing. But if the captain is in on it, he's telling them she's not on the ship, so he wants them to go to Curacao and look around. I mean, that's tough. Now, if he's the good guy and he truly searched the ship and he truly believes that she's not on the ship, then okay, then I guess he would give them the advice to go look on the island, right? Because if he really is a good guy and he personally searched a lot of the ship, he trusts his security who searched it, and he truly believes she's not on the ship, then I guess he would say that also. So this is another tough situation where it's hard to make heads or tails. But there's a lot of reviews on the captain that say that he's pretty sketchy and not good, not recommended. So, yeah, I mean, I really don't know what to make of that. It was like we were in a slow-motion house of terror, Eva recalls. Their world had been completely collapsed and they were on the brink of emotional breakdowns while the rest of the passengers continued on smiling and laughing and partying in the Caribbean sun, oblivious to the family's plight. Royal Caribbean paid for motel rooms for the family, and Illinois Mutual CEO Mike McCord disembarked with his wife, Kay, to provide emotional support for the Bradleys. The multimillionaire fetched coffee and hugged family members. The Bradleys checked into the Otra Banda, a rundown casino hotel on Curacao, late Tuesday afternoon. From the room, they contacted the U.S. Embassy and family members who they had been in touch with throughout the day, asking them to call authorities for help. Mary Christensen, Eva's younger sister, recalls that Eva could only muster a pained squeak on the phone. Ron had to take over. At 6:30 p.m., Ron, Eva, and Brad stood at the window of their hotel room overlooking the canal, watching Rhapsody of the Seas leave. They were close enough to throw a stone and hit it. Their stateroom was the only one that was dark. It was extremely difficult for us, Eva says, her voice breaking. That ship left as scheduled on time, and there we stood watching. The family remembers it as the worst night of their lives. All three huddled together on the room's sole king-side bed, crying. Ron vomited blood. He was so upset. At 6 a.m. Wednesday, 24 hours after Amy disappeared, authorities on Curacao began the first full day of sea and air searches for Amy. 3 helicopters, a British warship, a low-flying radar plane, and numerous cargo ships, tugboats, and fishing boats scoured the area and the coast for the next 2 days, finding no sign of her. With the help of Eva's brother John, who had contacted the FBI, and McCord, who chartered a plane, the Bradleys flew to St. Martin to intercept the Rhapsody of the Sea at its next port of call. At 7:30 a.m. on Thursday, before the first passengers left the Rhapsody, the Bradleys boarded a ferry and demanded a meeting with the captain. Upon their return to the Rhapsody, the Bradleys and McCord met in a conference room with the captain, a chief security officer, and other Royal Caribbean officials. As it turns out, the ship was in foreign waters and chartered in another nation, so the family had to ask permission for the FBI to be allowed to investigate. My personal feeling is that they felt they'd never see us again, and we were the last people they wanted to see, Eva says. Again, see, that's a tough one, because if they're not complicit in any of this, although I don't know if I mentioned this in the first episode, supposedly Affordable Adult Vacations did advertise with Royal Caribbean and had ads on the Rhapsody of the Seas in some capacity, either in magazines or throughout the ship or something. We might get into that more later, but that's a little weird. So, either way, but even if the Royal Caribbean were oblivious, did they want to remain as such? Like, did the captain and the head of security, did they truly not know what happened? But they just don't want the PR nightmare, so they're acting that way. So, obviously lack of integrity, but not necessarily guilt in being responsible directly for what happened to her. Or are they guilty, or are they not necessarily guilty, but they do know what happened and they just want to cover it up. So yeah, there's a lot of this is horrible. The cruise ship officers agreed to let 2 FBI agents casually dressed in jeans and golf shirts on board to investigate. The agents first interviewed each of the Bradleys separately and asked what happened. The Bradleys were also polygraphed by the FBI upon returning home and were quickly eliminated as suspects, their lawyer says. More than 24 hours later, Royal Caribbean employees began distributing Amy's photo while still allowing passengers on and off the boat. The Bradleys asked that guards be posted on the pool deck to look for her, but they allege it wasn't done. Without getting into specifics, Royal Caribbean says they acted appropriately. They also say they conducted another search with dogs a day later, a fact that Bradleys dispute, saying it was the FBI who brought in dogs. Either way, it also came up blank. Feeling helpless, the Bradleys exited the ship again Friday, March 27th in St. Thomas while the FBI investigated. McCord, the Illinois Mutual CEO, chartered a private Learjet for the family to fly from St. Thomas back to Richmond. They left on March 28th, the same day that the Rhapsody of the Seas returned to the docks at San Juan. And the same day, unbeknownst to the Bradleys, that the witness claimed to see Amy there. It had been 4 days since her father saw her sitting in the lounge chair on the cabin balcony. None of us wanted to leave, Eva Bradley recalls, crying. That's one of the most single difficult things. I don't really have words to describe what it was like to leave as I flew over the island and I didn't have Amy beside me. Okay. So I have another theory here now, because again, the more I read about this, the more it seems that the San Juan, Puerto Rico sighting is absolutely critical. Now, just because this guy's an aspiring police officer, that doesn't necessarily mean he 100% saw Amy, but... So this is apparently before any reward as well, because this is right away in the initial days. So, okay. So... If he's not mistaken, is it possible that Yellow, one of the other band members, one of the other crew, if there was some kind of an assault gone wrong, or whatever the case may be, they wanted Amy for themselves? Let's just postulate this theoretically. What happened in Puerto Rico? So they take her there. Does something go wrong there? And then they sell her or move her back with people in Curacao. And then she's bouncing between Curacao, Margarita Island, Aruba, Barbados, even San Francisco, as we went over that other sighting. But the more I look at it, the more it seems something happened in Puerto Rico. And what's even more tragic, in this tragic twist of fate, that they might have just missed her. Because if she really wasn't in Curacao, and she did leave the ship in Puerto Rico, which they didn't... Yeah, I mean, if they had stayed on the ship the entire time, would that have increased? I mean, it's kind of hard, right? Because theoretically, you would say smart money if the search was legit that she's not on the ship. And if somebody did want to kidnap her, would they really keep her? I mean, this is tough. This is tough. I mean, there really should be like a poll of criminals and traffickers. Just to get an idea, what would criminal-minded individuals do in that situation? Would the safer bet for criminals, like let's say it's an assault gone wrong, whatever the case may be, whether she was or wasn't premeditated trafficking, whether this was or wasn't premeditated trafficking, regardless, once you have an individual and you're not going to let them go, whatever led to that point, regardless, at that point, what are you going to do? Would a criminal more likely keep her on the ship? Would that be considered safe? See, if the whole crew and security is in on it, then you might think, yes, they might keep her on the ship, especially if they know that most of the time they're in international waters or in their, Then again, I mean, Puerto Rico, that's a U.S. territory, so... I mean, yeah, this is really tough. What would criminal-minded individuals do? Like, what... I mean, if they have contacts in Curacao, I guess you would get off the ship in Curacao. And, have these shady underworld contacts, especially if you also have some possibly politicians or corrupt police involved in this trafficking operation. Or other crimes, whatever. If you have protection in Curacao, I guess you would disembark, right? So I guess it would depend on what kind of connections the criminals have and whether or not the ship crew is in on it. I guess those would be the dependencies there. Let's continue here. None of us wanted to leave. Eva Bradley recalls crying. That's one of the most difficult things. That's one of the most difficult things. I don't really have words to describe what it was like to leave as I flew over the island and I didn't have Amy beside me. On the buffet in Mary Christensen's living room, beside a photo of Mary and Eva and their brothers and parents beaming happily while on a cruise on the Queen Elizabeth II in 1969, is a snapshot of Amy Bradley sitting on the sofa in her grandmother's house. On the end table in the photo is a community newspaper. Eerily, the headline on the paper reads, "Solve It." Every day we rack our brains. Where was she? Who did she talk to? I started asking questions from the minute she was missing, Christensen says. I pray for her every day. While she's talking in her Chesterfield County home, the phone rings. Christensen answers, but no one is on the line. She keeps the phone close by for the rest of the interview. When something like that happens, I believe at any minute I can get a call from her, Christensen says in a far-off voice. Back at the house where the Bradley family has lived for the past 18 years, in a room decorated with sports trophies and family photos, is an enterprise that occupies the Bradleys 24 hours a day. The search for Amy. The first thing you learn when you spend any time with Eva Bradley is to use the present tense when talking about Amy. She is almost 25. She is coming home. Though the Bradleys chose to close up Amy's apartment, they have kept her bedroom at home waiting for her. An electric candle has burned in a window of the house since they got back to Richmond. Amy's red Miata is parked in the driveway with a new license plate. We M1SSU. On May 12, 1998, Amy's 24th birthday, her family and friends gathered at the Bradley house for a party. The gifts were waiting in her room for her return. The cake is frozen. Amy's grandmother, Ruth Noblin, still brings her only granddaughter gifts when she goes on trips. On any given day, you can find a frisky white bulldog romping around their immaculately tended backyard, chomping on a deflated basketball. That's Bailey, Amy's dog. Reminders are everywhere. Over the fireplace is a pencil sketch of Amy and her dad. She had it done by a local artist as a surprise for her dad just months before the cruise. On the pillars of the Amy's front porch are tied 5 fresh and vibrant yellow ribbons. More are wrapped around the trees in the front yard. In the beginning, yellow ribbons were tied on trees around the neighborhood in solidarity. Over the last 13 months, many have quietly disappeared. On the wall in the Bradleys' command center is a framed poster that hung in the den of Amy's apartment before the family moved Amy's things back to the house a few months after her disappearance. In a scene of a stream rushing through jagged rocks, it reads, "Perseverance. In the confrontation between the stream and the rock, the stream always wins. Not through strength, but through persistence." It could be Eva's mantra. She wears a yellow ribbon and a tiny gold angel every day as a constant reminder of her mission. From sunup to late at night, she works the phones and replies to emails, following up leads and strategizing with the family's small inner circle of close friends and advisors. The ordeal has changed the Bradley family. Eva and Ron always look tired. Brad transferred from GMU to Virginia Commonwealth University and moved back home. Though Ron won the Illinois Mutual trip again this year, they didn't go. It's a trip to San Francisco. The company has sworn off cruises since Amy's disappearance. Okay, wow. Oh, man, all of these... I don't like these coincidences. Just like the photographer happens to be from San Francisco, which happens to be where there's another... That's the only Amy Bradley sighting that we know of in the continental U.S. So, yeah, that's tough. So the trip also just so happens to be to San... I mean, out of all of the cities, I mean, yeah, San Fran's a popular city, but it's not the only one. I mean, it's just, this is crazy. It was too soon, and they didn't want to see the same crowd they saw during the most horrible week of their lives. As the months go on, at the point where many parents might make the heartbreaking decision to grieve, the Bradleys won't give in. They note the whispers about a thriving white slavery trade in the Caribbean. They were just 30 miles from Venezuela, where Amy disappeared, and South America has the highest rate of kidnappings and abductions in the world. Some cruise industry critics raise questions about company hiring practices and the safety of passengers. According to an MSNBC news report last year, crimes on the high seas don't have to be reported or documented, since ships are often registered with foreign nations such as Liberia. Yet crime does happen on board. In August 98, federal criminal trial, for example, a woman claimed she had been raped by a crew member while on another Royal Caribbean cruise. The defendant in that case was found not guilty, however, after being deported from Italy. The cruise industry maintains crime on their ships is far less than what is on American soil. I mean, okay, but does that really change the crime that does happen on the ship? That's kind of a weird statement. Royal Caribbean spokesman Rich Steck says he finds it rather hard to believe that Amy could be held against her will on a ship for 4 days and be sprinted off the ship while everyone was looking for her. Well, I mean, if she was drugged and then she was put in a large suitcase or something, I mean, who knows? His company believes there is a more down-to-earth explanation for Amy's disappearance, he says, adding that the cruise line regrets that the Bradleys are directing their grief at Royal Caribbean. Steck says his company can't comment on specifics of the lawsuit because it hasn't been served yet, a fact that the Bradleys' lawyers dispute. But he offers the possibility that Amy jumped or was pushed overboard. See, if she was pushed overboard, I mean, that is a crime occurring on the ship. He says the FBI told Royal Caribbean that a table with Amy's footprints on it was found pushed against the railings with Amy's shoes atop it. He also says that Amy was heard to say to someone on board that a great way to get attention would be to jump overboard and swim to shore. Okay, wow. So here's a few problems with this statement. So it's his claim that the FBI said that. So we don't know that that's true because the FBI has not released that information. He says that Amy was heard to say to someone on board. So is this a case? So, okay. If this guy is repeating things that he believes to be true, okay, maybe Steck is not a liar. Maybe there were rumors, possibly started by the crew members or those responsible, that Amy said a great way to get attention would be to jump overboard and swim to shore. But here's the thing. If Amy's terrified of the ocean, of the open ocean, or the ocean in general, she only likes to swim in pools, she would never do that, right? So that might be a made-up story there. So, yeah, that's rough. Eva Bradley says Steck's statement about the table is a lie. The FBI has told her that Amy's footprints were never found on it, she says. Furthermore, the Bradley family all say the table was actually 3 feet from the railing. An FBI spokesperson denied that any representative of the FBI would have told Royal Caribbean anything about the evidence in the case, though they wouldn't confirm that Amy's footprints were not found on the table. Questioned later, Steck says he, quote, may have leapt to a conclusion, end quote. So he admitted, wow, that does not look good for Steck. He maintains that the FBI told the cruise line a footprint was found on the table, but he says he's not sure if it was Amy's. Wow, okay. So is he sure about which table? Because was there just a footprint on a random table in another random room that had nothing to do with this case? Wow, this guy's weird. The Bradleys are adamant that Amy didn't jump. She wasn't suicidal and she wasn't stupid, they say, and she was afraid of the ocean. As for any shoes being left in the room or on the balcony, Amy packed at least 10 pairs, they say, and they're not sure which are missing. So if that's the case, see, at least 10 pairs, so they don't know how many pairs she had, so she may have had shoes on. So is that not a confirmed fact that she was barefoot when she left the room? Hall, one of the family's lawyers, characterizes some of the statements coming out of the Royal Caribbean camp as nasty. The lawsuit alleges that Royal Caribbean employees and representatives defamed Ron and Bradley by circulating rumors that they were also involved in Amy's disappearance or murder once during an interview on MSNBC. The Bradleys and their lawyers angrily deny that Ron or Brad had anything to do with it and steadfastly claim that the Royal Caribbean acted negligently. In court, Hall says they intend to produce evidence showing that a Royal Caribbean crew member was missing on another vessel months before Amy's disappearance, and the response was entirely different. All the stops were pulled out to find the missing woman, though she too hasn't been found, Hall says. What? Who is this other missing woman? I actually can't find anything else on that. If any of the MindShock listeners know about this case, there's no name here. A crew member went missing several months before. And it's curious, how much of the current crew on the ship that Amy disappeared from, were they also on that other crew where someone disappeared and how many people knew about it? Is that why the bartender and that other woman who said that Amy had been kidnapped, do they know more? And what's going on? Who was the other woman who was kidnapped? And she was a crew member? This is weird. Continuing on here, as their search to find Amy and disprove Royal Caribbean's overboard theory goes on, however, evidence remains elusive. Royal Caribbean says none of its 40 video monitors that night were linked to videotape, and none of the guards recall seeing Amy. Okay, what? Okay, this is weird. So there were 40 video monitors. Does that mean cameras? What is it? 40 video monitors. So you'd think, is that one per camera? So if there's 40 security videos, they say none of them were linked on videotape, but wasn't there that cryptic statement from either the FBI or whoever that said that there's some videotape evidence of Amy out after being in a room with or without Yellow? Was there some video evidence of her with Yellow, as the other witnesses alleged? Now, the other thing is curious. So none of the guards recall seeing Amy. Are they lying? Were they told to lie? Because why would the other passengers lie? The guards, if told to lie, would they not lie? There are electronic records of Amy using her keycard to enter the room 3:40 a.m. Tuesday. But her brother Brad says because the ship's lock link system does not record when a passenger exits the room, there is no record of what time Amy left the room. She had her driver's license in her pocket, and it could have conceivably been used to clear her through U.S. Customs in San Juan. But the exit records at U.S. Customs for Rhapsody of the Seas passengers for March 28th are missing, according to the Bradley lawyers who tried to get them through a federal Freedom of Information Act request. Okay, no, this is too much. We are firmly in MINDSHOCK land. So here's the thing. So are these exit records for U.S. Customs? You would think this is something that they would keep track of. I mean, unless they go missing all the time, and this is not, but it's hard to believe that they're just randomly going missing. So did someone make them go missing? And there's 2 points here, because, see, I actually didn't know this. This is mind-shocking information. So theoretically, she could have actually walked herself through customs. And yet because we have no evidence whether she did or she did not, and if she was under duress and with someone, possibly drugged or not. I mean, I don't know, that's tough. On the other hand, if they just got her out through the luggage, I mean, if the crew's involved, they, I guess, could do that, then, I mean, who knows? But that's crazy that the exit records are missing. Now, the exit records are missing only for the Rhapsody of the Seas passengers on March 28th? I mean, are any other records missing, or is this the only record that's missing? This is insanity. This is absolute insanity. None of it deters the Bradleys. They cling to their belief that someone saw Amy, wanted her, took her, and still has her. I feel Amy. I can't express it any other way. Sometimes I'm washed with her, Eva Bradley says. She is a very strong person. Anyone who plays athletics at the college level has a certain amount of determination and stick-to-itiveness. She would be capable of playing along until she could make a friend or make a break. She's not a little sissy or a wimp. But as the months go on, it requires a faith that would daunt even the most devoted parent. Anybody who has a child will understand, Eva continues, her voice resolute though tears streak her face. We will look for her until we find her. The last thing on our minds before we go to bed is, what are we going to do tomorrow? I know she's working to get home to us. We have a lot of faith in God, and we know God wants it to be 4 of us, not 3 of us. So, yeah, heartbreaking article there, but with a lot of new info that we actually didn't go over before, and it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I don't know what to make of this. There's just so much conflicting information. It's almost too convenient. But there we have it. I mean, there will be at least 1 or 2 more episodes. There's actually quite a bit more to go over, believe it or not. Very, very perplexing case. So, hope everybody found another edition of MINDSHOCK True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.